Welcome to Part 3 of our series on campaign finance reform. Part 3 of the Godfather series was considered a disappointment, which is worrisome. On the other hand, Part 3 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy won the Oscar, so that. If you haven't seen Part 1 or Part 2, please check them out. You can get the links in the description below. I finished Part 2 by noting that while we wait for a Supreme Court that'll listen to reasonable alternatives to the infamous Citizens United and Buckley decisions, there's a lot we can do right now to limit the influence of big money on elections. And there is. Even better, a lot of it has already been tried successfully, so we know that it works. So get ready for a ride across an array of campaign finance reforms in this episode of Progressive Solutions. As always, a reminder, I want to hear from you. What do you think of these ideas? Do you have any others? Are there other issues that you want to see here? Please leave your comments below. Before talking about what we can do, there are two things we need to know. First, I want to debunk a popular idea. This is the notion that providing free media to campaigns can make a difference. The logistics of buying television and radio airtime vary enormously across the country, and it doesn't always make sense. Someone running for Congress in New York City would have to spend a fortune, and most of that money would be wasted because over 90% of their audience lives in other districts. Conversely, a candidate in rural Iowa or Montana might buy some radio time, but their television buys would probably be funneled entirely through county-wide cable channels. That's why most federal public funding bills don't offer free media time. What some of them offer is vouchers that can be used either to buy media time or can be sold at face value to their political party. And this just cuts out independence and cements the two-party system. Remember that media spending is still spending, just like direct mail or campaign staff or any other expense. If campaigns get enough cash, they can decide how much to spend on media and on which media. So much for free airtime. Second, let's talk about media coverage. Back in 2008, I wrote a bill to provide full public funding of elections in New York City that was introduced into the New York City Council, and we held a press conference, and nobody showed up. We went into the City Hall press room to let them know we were doing this, and somebody explained why they didn't want to cover the story. Limiting spending means limiting ad money for television and radio and newspapers, and those media outlets don't want that, so they won't generally report on attempts to limit spending. That's why, despite decades of polling that show massive support for campaign finance reform, you'll rarely see it covered on the nightly news. When serious campaign finance reform happens, it'll be because we bypass the major media and spread the word through social media. And by the way, right now, social media would benefit, because campaigns would be looking for lower-cost advertising options. Okay, now on to our first idea. War chests. One reason incumbents are so hard to beat is because they generally have a lot of money left over from their last campaign. These war chests are a massive incumbency protection scheme. And those war chests can last long after an elected official retires. That just sits around waiting for somebody to do something with the money. If campaigns are required to return any unspent donations after the campaign, then each election cycle everybody starts from zero. This would not only make elected officials easier to challenge, but would also make enacting public funding easier because incumbents would no longer have that advantage. Now, some places allow candidates to donate that extra money to charities, and this sounds like a good idea, but it's also a way for candidates to buy support from the charities they donate to. Eliminating war chests also puts a dent in the next topic, transfers. Most states and federal law limit how much people can donate to a campaign, but donors can also give money to party committees and affiliated organizations, all of which can transfer money to the candidates. Candidates can also transfer money around between campaign committees and transfer money to party committees, and political parties can transfer money all over the place. Transfers are one of the great loophole categories in campaign finance law. They happen all the time, they're done in gigantic amounts, and they basically make most donation limits meaningless. And donors have no control over what money gets transferred or where. Your donation might not be going where you want it to go. On the other hand, large donors and fundraisers usually know where the money's ending up, and they're just taking advantage of the loophole. This kind of thing is what got former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay in a mess of legal trouble. Eliminating, or at least severely limiting transfers would help to make fundraising more honest and transparent. And speaking of transparency, disclosure. In 2013, Scott Stringer was the shoo-in for New York City Comptroller. Once he entered the race, everybody who had any chance of winning dropped out. Suddenly, at the last minute, former Governor Eliot Spitzer, who had resigned his governorship in disgrace a few years earlier, tried to make a comeback by entering this race. He could enter late because he was rich and he could fund his own campaign. A couple of political consultants, and presumably supporters of Scott Stringer, started a super PAC. In just over a month, they raised and spent over $600,000, and they got that money from just 8 donors. How do I know that? Because New York City has full disclosure laws. Everyone who spends more than a tiny amount on campaigns, even in independent efforts, has to report where they get the money and where they spend it. Full disclosure isn't yet an enormously powerful tool by itself because most people and groups don't really care who knows what they're up to, but over time it can make a difference as voters become better educated and more savvy. I mentioned the political consultants who raised all that money. They were officially acting independently of the Stringer campaign, but there's one area where candidates and outside groups can work together. Joint fundraising. A joint fundraising committee is a coalition of candidates, party committees, PACs, and other political organizations in any combination. They band together and they create a contract to raise money together and decide how that money will be split among the participants. Notice that a joint fundraising committee can contain both candidates and PACs, even though they're supposed to be operating separately. This is a major loophole in laws that are supposed to keep these groups apart. By eliminating joint fundraising committees and activities, we can close that loophole. Alternatively, perhaps 2 or more candidates or a candidate and a party committee could agree to raise money at the same function. This could still be allowed provided that donors are required to make separate donations to each entity. Joint fundraising is one way candidates have of ingratiating themselves to a political party. Another way to do this is with leadership PACs. It seems that every major political party leader or wannabe has a leadership PAC. Theoretically, this is an entity that's completely separate from the official's own campaign, but here's where a major firewall is broken. Unlike actual outside organizations, a leadership PAC is controlled by the elected official, just as they control their own campaign committee. They say that they're raising money to help other candidates and their political party, but really they're just using their own fundraising ability to gain influence. An elected official can't use their leadership PAC money to fund their own campaign, and at the federal level there's a limit to how much they can donate to other campaigns, but a leadership PAC can make independent expenditures. Also, they could hire the spouse or child of a candidate they're supporting and pay that person anything they want, and that person they hire doesn't have to do any work at all. And such a PAC could transfer money to other PACs, so in theory, a single legitimate PAC combined with a bunch of phony PACs could funnel unlimited amounts of money to their preferred candidates. Leadership PACs are a large part of how party leaders get to be party leaders. Both House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy with his Majority Committee PAC and the Speaker Nancy Pelosi with her PAC to the Future have bought a lot of support with this money. Eliminating leadership PACs is one way to make it easier for party members who don't have access to gobs of money to rise to leadership positions. It will also change how party leaders behave. And it can make it a lot easier to get to full public funding of elections. The list I've gone through isn't exhaustive. There are plenty of other possibilities, such as more strictly limiting coordination between party committees and campaigns, or eliminating primaries in favor of full ranked choice voting. And that's a topic I'll cover in another video. The point is, there's a lot we can do right now to enact changes that will make campaigns far more fair, honest, and transparent, and to hold incumbents to a higher standard by making it easier to kick them out of office. No one program, even full public funding of elections, is a magic bullet. We need all of them put together. If, however, we start by getting a few things done, it'll make a difference, and it'll make getting the rest a lot easier. So which reform is your favorite? And what other reforms would you like to see? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you see and want to see more videos, hit that subscribe button and tell your friends. As always, thanks for watching. Stay progressive.